Hello again off the top, the Filter Forefront, our top four of the day, including, does freedom of speech mean freedom to tattoo? But we'll begin with this. While Arizona's immigration law remains a hot topic, the president is beefing up security along the border. He's ordered 1,200 National Guard troops to beef it up. And take a look at this video. It comes from the website secureborderintel.org. The group's spokesman says they've placed nearly a dozen cameras on crude desert pathways in a 30-mile stretch. They found human trafficking, drug trafficking, and people carrying guns after crossing the border. These tapes were turned over to the U.S. Border Patrol. The National Guard is expected to focus on efforts against drug trafficking, which has turned into a border region murder zone. John McCain says that's a great start, but it's going to take a whole lot more than that.
I appreciate the additional 1,200 being sent of the Guard, as well as additional 500 million, but it's simply not enough. We need 6,000. We need 3,000 across the border, and additional 3,000 National Guard troops to the Arizona-Mexico border.
Our contributors tonight, Emmy Award-winning journalist David Reese and the editor of RedCounty.com, Matt Cunningham. Our pictures are furnished by Skype. Matt, I'll start with you. If you send 1,200 in to do the job of 6,000, how much of a difference can this really make?
It can make some. It's a start. The part of the key, obviously enforcement's only part of the border question. I think you need to have a generous and workable guest worker program to take the pressure off of the illegal crossings. But it's a start, because I think if you can get more guys at the border and start closing the areas where the crossings occur, you can narrow your options as to where to meet the crossings at. If they have a wide, it's like you want to force them into a funnel. It's easier to intercept the illegal crossings and the drug traffickers if you narrow the corridors by which they can cross over. But that said, I think it just goes to show the political trickiness of this whole question. There's no real way to. Conservatives want to have enforcement first, foremost, and only. Liberals tend to want to have no enforcement and have and focus more on amnesty or a pathway to citizenship. And I think the workable way is going to be somewhere in the middle. You're going to have to enforce the border first, so Americans are politically trustworthy that the pathway to citizenship or some sort of legal status for immigrants here now, legal immigrants, to be accepting of that.
David, what do you think here? Did the president do the right thing, or is he just trying to calm the waters?
Well, I think he's trying to calm the waters, and I think I agree with Matt to some extent, but I got to be honest, I'm really surprised at how tepid Matt's endorsement of this is. I would have thought he would have been, hell yeah, we need a lot more troops here, because that's actually what I think, and I'm kind of surprised that Matt doesn't agree, because if you're going to fix this problem, let's not throw a Band-Aid on it. Let's fix the problem. And, John McCain and the leaders in Arizona were the first ones to tell you that it's a war zone down there. So if you're going to try to fix this problem, which, by the way, Arizona's lawmakers wouldn't have passed SB 1070 and caused this huge uproar if the federal government had been doing its job to begin with, which is enforcing our borders. So, yeah, we need 6,000 troops. If that's what John McCain says, he's there. I trust him.
All right, Matt, I'll give you 10 seconds if you want to respond.
Well, I think part of McCain's, you got to understand, McCain is in a very intense Republican primary fight with J.D. Hayworth, who has made a big issue of illegal immigration, which is already a big issue in Arizona. So I think you have to consider there's an element of political backside covering going on by John McCain.
It's all politics, buddy.
And it always is.
It's all politics.
All right, let's move on. Now, this next item is confusing. Perhaps our contributors will be able to shed some light, or maybe they won't. Will it be don't ask, don't tell? The president's made it clear it is his intention to repeal don't ask, don't tell in the military. Today, Defense Secretary Robert Gates gave lukewarm support to a new White House plan for Congress to immediately repeal the law. The plan allows Gates to decide when to implement it, but he says he'd like more time to study the situation. Okay, one man's guess here. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. Why can't it happen now, David? How much time do you need?
Oh, this is just running out the clock, and this is just the military dragging their feet. And I'm really surprised that Gates is this dumb, because the president, who is the commander-in-chief, has already come out and said he wants this to happen. So what are we waiting for? What is 6 more months of studying going to tell you about this, okay? Nothing's going to change in 6 months. Just do it already, and the commander-in-chief, the president, has already mandated it. So, this is just foot dragging and hoping that maybe something will distract him and he won't notice that they haven't implemented it. The American people want it. It's time. Let's just do it and stop talking about it.
Now, Matt, can you cite some examples as to why this is not the time?
Well, I think these things should be decided on the basis of military necessity, and no one has made a case as to why this is militarily necessary. The don't ask, don't tell policy has been in place for, since 1993. It's working. No one seems to have a real problem with it. It's not hurting our military's ability to do its job, and that should be the primary consideration in these cases. The military is not a laboratory for social experimentation. We need to stop treating it as such. This is on the same veins as making sure we have to put women in subs or put women in combat because we're trying to make some sort of statement, rather than asking ourselves, does this increase and make our military a more effective fighting force? Does it make it more able to defend this country effectively from all foes? And that's not how it's looked at. It's just politics, and military policy ought to be decided by what works best, not as to which political interest group is pleased.
David, I know you're going to take exception to that. Go ahead.
Well, this whole idea that don't ask, don't tell is working is a farce. I mean, it's such a joke to start with. I mean, it was a non-policy policy. You know, it was Bill Clinton couldn't push through what he wanted to do back in '93, so we put this in place. I mean, let's just deal with this once and for all. And Matt, why don't we try it and see how it works? Because we tried it your way, and I don't think it is working. I mean, you know, there are always going to be gay people in the military. Newsflash.
Well, you know what? Is it working? Is it not working? Our military has not been affected by this. But, Matt, the thing I don't understand is, what does it hurt? Is it going to make us better? Well, it's certainly not going to make us worse.
No, well, the question, do we do things because there's no reason maybe not to? Shouldn't the burden be on, why do we have to do this? How does this make our military more effective? How does it make it a more effective fighting force?
And this is America.
It's not. There's a lot of the military operates on a lot of rules that aren't applicable in civil society.
Okay, but using what you're saying,
the rules that work in civil society don't necessarily work in the military society and military culture.
Okay, and
I think it's a mistake to try to impose that on it because we think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, but given what you're saying, how does it benefit the military not to acknowledge these people? In other words, you're saying, why should we implement it? Simply because we should implement it. Well, why was it implemented in the first place? I mean,
and that was a compromise. It was a political compromise because President Clinton wanted to push through a complete repeal of a ban on gays serving in the military.
Right.
There was a political pushback, and that was his compromise. And I think it's worked fine. We can agree to disagree. And obviously, David has a different point of view, but I haven't seen anybody come out with any real military justification as to why this needs to be done.
Well, I think Matt just inadvertently hit the nail on the head when he said that the military has a bunch of rules that aren't necessarily applicable to the rest of us. Bingo. So why don't we let societal rules finally have some common sense in the military? Screw military intelligence, which we'd all would agree is an oxymoron. Why don't we have some common sense about this?
Okay, why don't we let soldiers unionize? Why don't we impose prevailing wage? Why don't we impose a lot of the rules we have in civil society on the military and see how all that works?
All right. Well, with that, let's move on. We'll agree to disagree there.